Hello future tech leaders, I am Sindhuja. Based on my own experience, I know that learning the right skills can shape our future. What if I say learning was as thrilled as the tech world itself? There we go. At CloudFoundation, that's exactly what you will experience. From day one, you will be immersed in the interactive sessions and expert-led courses that covers most of the widely used technologies in the zone of data science to cloud computing, which brings more light to the life of a techie. I am so excited to help you and unlock the true potential of a technology. Well, then why to wait? Let's see what it unfolds. Join us as we dive into Sailpoint, an identity governance technology, and discover how it helps businesses manage security and compliance.
Guys, so in the last session we were briefly talking about policies, to what type of policy we have in Sailpoint. Why do we need to implement policies? So let's say we are going to implement SOD policies. What kind of restrictions we can implement? How to prevent user access? User access provided to the unauthorized employees we can restrict. So in that perspective, we have learned a lot. So once we implement the policies, what kind of policy changes? We can do it with the help of variables like policies, scheme variable, allow request with violation, lot of variables we have in Sailpoint related to Sail policies. You can refer more. To grant the access to the providing access to the target system, target application. So if anyone is looking for, any user is looking for any target application, so Sailpoint will make sure, so it has to provide the access. So that's all about provisioning. So provisioning is all about providing access. So deprovisioning, which means we are going to disable or delete the user access in the target application. Correct. So have you thought about it? So once end user commit to access request, what will happen in the target? You are an end user, you have some way to get what will happen in the back end. Which workflow is going to be called because we have implemented a lot of variable changes. So when it comes to multi-level approvals, when it comes to policy defined, we have made some changes on the variable level. You may call it as arguments as well. We have implemented something. So how many workflows is going to be called from the back end? Any? Go to Managing User Access page. Guys, I'm audible. If I'm fading out, just let me know. So we have selected one user. We'll make sure. We will select this business role and we will submit a ticket. So if there is any business justification we have to provide, we will submit, we will mention the business justification and we will hit the submit button. Once we hit the submit button, it's processing request, which means in the back end, some workflow already called, and based on your workflow references, each and every activity will be performed. So a lot of activities will be performed. So we'll talk about that. So now request submitted successfully. So this is the request number. So let's go to access request. So now it's pending for approval. David Anderson. Click on the details tab. Current step is approved. On provision. So this is the requested item since it's a business role. So it's going to be a signed role. And all the day I told it it's a detected role. Approval status pending. That's fine. So it's pending for some approval. So you could see those details under the Interaction tab. So here provisioning status is pending. So in my environment, so this application is a connected application because I have written some rule provisioning rule which is responsible to grant the access in the target application. So it's pending for approval. Once the approval is clear, the provision will happen. That's fine. So now I want to access the same access request from the developer. So which object type I have to select? Anyone quickly? It will be identity request. So this is the 392 is the access request number, what we submitted today. So guys, pay attention. This is very important. So whenever you are going to submit access request, so provisioning plan will be generated as a developer. So it's your primary task. You should know what is provisioning plan. So provisioning plan is all about granting access in the target application. It's kind of your plan where all the required details will be there. Based on these details, provision will happen. Got it? So this provisioning plan. Since I have selected only one role, so one provisioning plan are there. Let's say user selected multiple roles, multiple entitlements and multiple provisioning plan will be there. Important point. Can you explain it one more time? So here user selected only one business role. So basically once the approval is done, so provision will happen, which means provisioning engine will be triggered and provision will happen and the status will get completed. These details you are accessing from the front end. As usual, you will access, that's fine. But as a developer, as an administrator, you should know. So what will happen in the back end? So that's what we are going to learn today. The moment user hit the submit button, request will submit successfully. Correct. So before that it was showing processing request and she. Usually it will take a couple of seconds in that meantime. So workflows will be called and a lot of activities will be happen within a couple of seconds. So we are going to understand that before that, you should know once we hit the submit button. So provisioning plan will be generated and the provisioning plan will get stored under this request. Got me fine now. Got it in scenario, we have selected only one role, one business role. So one provisioning plan is there. So in this provisioning plan, clearly it indicates, so this is the assigned role, which means it's a business role. The operation is addition and this is the value of the business role. Correct. And this needs to be create and this group needs to be add. This manager group means that these entitlement needs to be add. Got it. From line number 23 to 45, we have a provisioning plan. And why? Why do you need the provision and planning again? I'm sorry. So because end user submitted an access request here and end user requested to get this business role. This business role may have multiple IT roles and entitlements grouped together. So we'll make sure this business role and all other IT roles entitlement should get added to the user profile so that user will get the access. So now Sailpoint triggered a provisioning plan. Now you got it? Got it. So this provisioning plan is responsible for the provisioning activity basically. Got it. So now one more thing, user has selected only one business role. So one provisioning plan. In some scenarios, you could see multiple provisioning. So let me try to find that. Just a minute. Got it? So this is a good example. So in this access request here, you could see from line number 3 to 6, we have one provisioning plan from line number 58 to 79. Another provisioning plan from line number 8 to 105. Another provisioning plan. So when you have multiple provisioning plans, Sailpoint workflows, a point has a lot of workflows. So workflows are responsible to compile multiple provisioning plan into one provisioning project, which means so here you could see from line number 15 tree. So inside this provisioning project, we have 3 provisioning plan. So basically this provisioning plan will be compiled into provisioning project new to one workflow. So this point also you should understand. Got it? Now let's talk about that workflow. Are we clear so far? Guys, you could in understand, ask Mel explain quickly because this is going to be very important. Because when you're going to troubleshoot, you should know this is what provision plan. So this is how we are going to trigger an event, lot of things. So now whenever we hit the submit button, workflows will be called and the main workflow name is the same provision. And this is the workflow where we have done a lot of changes. I mean a lot of variable changes we have done so this notification scheme whenever email is going to get triggered based on this variable only. If you want to trigger email only to user requester or manager or if you want to add somebody, we can do it. So each and every variable will be having some description. So just go through that. You will understand if you want to trigger email to users. This email template will be called and you know how to create an email template. And you can go to the email template object. So the important one is approval mode. Already we talked about that approval scheme. We talked about that. So this is the email template, one security officer name. How to declare fallback approval. We talked about that policy scheme. I have explained so enable literary request if any provisioning ended with failure. Sometimes, so say what is trying to grant this access. So it's getting failure, failed. So here retrace will be there. Correct? Which means each and every 60 minutes on each and every 120 minutes. By default, each and every 60 minutes, a point will try to grant this access by default. So in that scenario, if you're going to end up with, then only that retrieve will happen or else it won't. So policies to check. I think I have a question. Guys, in the last session, we talked about policies. So we know once we hit the submit button, each and every active policies will be validated against the requester item, which means each and every role and entitlement, whatever it requested by end user. So those items will be validated against the active policy. So let's say we have 500 policies, which is active in our system. Now, whenever end user is going to submit access request, it will take instead of couple of seconds, it will take a couple of minutes, maybe 60 seconds, 1 minute. So it's going to take consume a couple of seconds extra time. So in that scenario, you may get requirement from stakeholder saying so. No need to validate all the policies. Instead of that, we have a list of policy. So this policy is enough to validate. So in that scenario, we will utilize this variable. So the similar way, we have a lot of variables like approval set, allow request with violation. We talked yesterday, last session. Require violation review comments except. So once this variable is done, it will come to initialize. So here you could see, so from line up at that P85. So everything is completed, all the variable declaration, everything is done. So this is going to be the first step. The 86, it's going to be the start step, and whenever the line, it's going to come here. It will transition to initialize them. So where is that initialize step from line number 389 to 426? It's going to be the initialized step. So in this initialized step, here we have argument name, blue form, template identity name, identity display name. It clearly indicates arguments are nothing except variable. In Sailpoint, arguments and variable both are same. First 1 second. So because here we have declared all the variable name, variable definition, everything. So these values will be fixed to you. You got it? See here we have a require violation review comments, allow request with violation policies to check policies in. We have a variable that to fix the value. Here they have given a reference. So policy scheme VR, you will be faced from here line number 189. So the value is interactive. So, and one more thing, here we have a workflow reference as well. So identity request initialize. So you guys should understand whenever this main worker flow is going to be called call and same provisioning. So 5 subprocess workflows will be called. And the name are identity request. Identity request initialize. Identity request approve. The second one. Identity request provision. Third row, one identity request notify the fourth workflow, and the fifth one will be identity request finalized. So these 5 workflows, whatever checkbox enabled, these 5 workflows will be called. You may call it as it's a sub-process or sub-workflows of the main workflow. Are we clear? So when all these 5s that being called, at that point you just able to see all 5 in one shot. Are you just going to know one by one? It will call. I have shown the transition step. The first step starts second. It's going to transition to starting step. I mean the initial step. In the initial step, the main work and the sub workflow will be called identity request, initialize workflow. Sometimes what directly workflow will be called, or sometimes the step will be called. But go ahead. No. So always remember, LCMM provisioning is the main workflow and these 5s are sub workflow. That's very important. So each and every workflows are responsible to some activity. Since you guys know, once you hit the submit button, which means user has submitted a request and it got completed successfully, it got submitted successfully. Now it will go for approval. As you guys know, once the approval is done, it will go for provisioning. Once the provisioning is done, end user will receive an email saying your access or complete successfully. This is your current. Shall blah, 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 all the information we mentioned over there. Correct. So this is what you have seen. But we can easily say approval needs to be granted from manager or appropriate parties. But say one will take care of the doctor because we are not going to ask the manager. We are not going to ask somebody to provide the information from the Sailpoint. We'll take care all the activity, the automated process. So now each and every activity will be taken. So initialize workflows will take care of some certain activity. This approval workflow will take care all the approval activity. So here, when we are talking about approval, it could be approval may approve the decision. Approval may approve the work item or approval may deny the requested item. So in that scenario, everything will be taken care of. It is approved. After it approved workflow again, it will come to provision. So provision activity will be taken care of this workflow. So notify workflow is responsible to trigger an email. Today I have shown we have a notification scheme variable which is responsible whom we are going to send any. Those activity will be taken care of. It is notify, email and finalized workflows are responsible to verify, validate everything. So like requested item has been granted or not. What about the provisioning status? Each and everything will be validated. If you guys are fine, I'll explain briefly. You got it. LCM provisioning. So these are the variable. This is XML tag in line number 3. Always you can find the object information. The object type could be anything. At what time the object got created? What is the unique idea of this object? What is the object name when it got modified to all these information that you have and will be available in the object? So these are the variables. Already I have explained. So this is going to be the starting step. Suresh, once again I'm saying. So this is going to be the starting step. So the line number 386 to 88. Now it will transition to initialize step. So where is the step from line number 389 to 426? So these are the required variables. Based on these variables, this step is going to be called. This variable already we have declared here. Whatever value definition we have defined here. So based on those values, it will be updated over here. That's very important. So once this is done, it's going to be called this sub workflow called identity request to initialize. This is going to be the sub workflow. So this identity request to initialize will be called, and this workflow is responsible for initialize active. Like it is responsible for compiled provisioning plan into a provisioning project. Already, I have shown we have submitted access request. Once we hit the submit button, request will submit successfully and in the backend provisioning plan got generated. If you have multiple provisioning plan, a single provisioning plan, even though it's responsible to compile everything into one provisioning project. Got. So again XML tag object information variables. In the sub process, this is going to be the starting step from line number 214 to 2260. The first transition will happen to compile project 260. The first step, it's going to be called in the name of compile project. Here we have a source code. This source code will take care to compile the provisioning plan into a provisioning plan, and then we have a provisioning project. Are we clear, guys? If you want to become a developer, then you have to pay attention. It's very important. Second step, build approval set. Build approval set means it will validate the requested item, whether they have an owner or not. If there is an owner is available, then approval set should be there. The kind of work item will be generated and then work item all to the appropriate parties. Appropriate approvals. So those validation will be done in the approval set. The approval set basically will be there. So once this step is done, it will transition to check policies 264. So whoever attended this last session, you might have seen once we hit the submit button, policy violation will be triggered. I mean it will trigger a violation or it will show some policy relevant information. So those steps will be done by this step. Those activity will be done by this step. Like check policies is the step name. So here, what are the required variables? Like required violation review comments, allow requests with violation, policies to check policy scheme. So here again, another workflow is going to be called identity request violation review. It's the sub workflow of the another workflow. So you can skip, no worries. So once all the policy, when all the requested item will be validated against all the active policies. Due to this step, once this is done, it will go to transition to reveal approval set. Hey Rakesh, I have a question. Go ahead, what is sub workflow? We have a main workflow. We have a sub workflow to have a better understanding. I'm explaining. So from say, but standpoint, everything is all our workflow. There is no such as a main workflow. This is the sub workflow. What is it workflow? Workflow reference in line number 285. So each and everything we cannot mention over here. So that's why we have created a workflow separately and we are adding some references here. It means this workflow will be called. So whenever the step is going to be called, this workflow will be called here. What is it? No, I didn't get. So once again, I'm saying we have LC mem provisioning workflow here. This is the main workflow. Once we hit the submit button, this workflow will be called in out-of-the-box design. So this is going to be variables. And this is going to be starting step. So transition mean it will transition one step to another step. Sometimes the step won't be available. The requested item won't be available. So the step will be skipped. So here we have a workflow reference from line number of 1009 to 421 and the workflow reference is identity request initial. What does that mean? Which means this workflow will be called in this step. Got it now? This step from that step, the workflow will be called. Yes, in this step from line number 380, 380, 389 to 426. This step will be called. This workflow will be called inside this step. Why that step? Like what are the steps? Steps mean it's a step by step. It will go from one exactly step by step. It will go. Because once you submit button, initialize step will be called. So inside this initial step here, identity request initialize workflow will be called. Imagine here we don't have mentioned this workflow. Reference is here. Instead of mentioning this. If you are not going to mention, then you have to mention all these steps inside the main workflow. And it's going to be trouble each and every time you are going to submit a request as an end user standpoint. It will consume lot of times. So each and every step you have to mention from here, from starting step. From line number 2, 4, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have to mention everything over there. We've got it on him. And audible, guys. Rakesh, go ahead. So this workflow example, how it is coming? It's coming from the like double clicking the object. It will open a what? Double clicking the object means how we are getting into this page, this object editor page. This is the debug link. No, the XML page, I'm asking, not here. Just open the object for identity request. You guys click on that and it will. Got. So we were talking about this initialize workflow and we already talked. So the first step is completed. Compile project. Second step, build approval set, and third step, check policies. So where it is mentioned those steps, it needs to call first the step and then second step, that flow. So here we have a transition. Transition to compile project. Compile project, here the name we have compile project, which means this is going to be from line number 217 to 260. The step will be called compile project. This is going to be N. It will transition to lot of steps here. Know the sequence. Where do we need to mention anywhere the sequence or exactly? Let me explain. So this is going to be first step here. This is going to be starting step. So, which means the workflow has been called already and the transition will happen to compile project. Line number 10. So the compile project. So from line number 217, compile project step will be called to 2 cents. So here we have a transition to build approval set. So this transition step from lab to number 258. So it's going to be 261 to 265 the build approval set. Once it completes, it will transition to check policies. So check policy step, it's going to be from 2266 to 291 check policies. Correct. And after that the transition will happen to again rebuild approval set. So here I was asking why again it's going to be rebuild approval set. If you attend the last session, you might know once we hit the submit button, if any violation form, it will show policy violation got triggered. Do you guys remember? Let me show it quickly. So each step, at the end of the step, it is transitioning to other steps. It will transition to either end step or else it will refer to some other. So that's the step. The step inside. The step will be weekend. And finally, do not forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel.